I don't stand side by side with nobody till I bleed with them first.
What did we just see? You probably think this world is a dream come true.
When I step into this ring, yeah, bro, I am addicted.
Don't sleep on Luca!
Maybe tomorrow we'll all wear 42.
If you fight for your dreams will fight for you.
So here I was, sitting on my day off, trying to figure out what do I want to do, what do I want to do so that my day just feels like it wasn't wasted. I tried listening to some new music, tried playing some Fortnite, doom scroll, typical Gen Z day, but I was like, I want something productive. I want to do something productive. And the issue that I have is that just for the life of me, I can't find anything to write about. My dad has been trying to get me to do a lot more content ever since I fixed my PC, but just for the life of me, I couldn't find anything to write about. To try and spark some inspiration, I was like, let me turn to my one true love of music. And I decided to start off with listening to some songs from Christian Curia's latest album, Paradigm, which I seriously can't wait to talk about that record in the year-end review video. But I brought this up because at the same time I was looking at my spreadsheet of video ideas, and as I was sitting there enjoying the music, the question kind of blossomed in my head: why isn't R&B not as big anymore? I'm not one for numbers and popularity. I would literally listen to an artist with 137 monthly listeners on Spotify if the music is good enough. But seriously, let's talk about it. A genre with some of the biggest names in the music world, pumping out hit after hit. You're talking about Michael Jackson, Prince, Luther Vandross, Aretha Franklin, Mary J. Blige, TLC, the Isley Brothers. There's just so many. You look in the modern era and you look at names like Usher, Neo, Mario, Miguel, Bruno Mars, The Weeknd, Frank Ocean, SZA. Just makes me curious, like what kind of happened to the genre, and it also kind of made me curious, what do other people think on this topic, and so it ended up sparking the question, why is R&B not as popular anymore? What could possibly be the reason for its decline in popularity despite quality music and artists continuing to come out of the genre? And also, is it one singular reason, or is it multiple things? I'm kind of having a difficult time kind of properly articulating this analogy, but basically when something is on the rise, something has to decline, like something is big now or big before, but now it's not, and you kind of look at different things, like you see it in the sports world. Someone who was the top player on a team is later replaced by another top player. You see it in the media world where, like let's say looking at animation, one animation studio is the big one, but before there was a different one, and so when it kind of comes to R&B's popularity, in came rap. The phrase, "what have you done for me lately," is never more accurate than when it is applied to the music world, because popularity in the music world is finite. It is all about what is the latest trend. Even in the big genres themselves, you see subgenres rise in popularity only to be topped by another subgenre on the rise. For R&B and every other genre, rap was basically a freight train that could not be stopped. The genre was on a historic rise and people took notice. But it wasn't immediate because you still had multiple genres popping off in the music world at the same time. And, I think that was something that was unique, that for a stretch of time, all the genres got to eat. And I think a big part of that was due to rap's perception. When rap started snowballing into the juggernaut genre we know that it is today, the mainstream media tried kind of everything to stop it from getting to that point. Like, I don't really want to talk about the man due to his current antics, but Kanye is one of the main artists that is credited for shifting that perception, because his first 3 works were literally described as what killed gangster rap, and with that, many of the labels that held rap from launching into the mainstream were removed, and again, it was a juggernaut that could not be stopped. And by the time we got to the 2010s, nobody really cared about the substance of music too much, so that subgenre made a return anyways, but rap as a whole became the popular thing, and thus it became the thing everybody wanted to do. And as a result, most other genres had to take a backseat, and you could argue R&B got it the worst, as many of its biggest stars lost the attention And even worse, to appeal to mainstream, the rap genre would borrow the services of the pop and R&B genres for its hooks and choruses to still have that sort of radio playability. I mean, before it was ODB featuring on Mary J. Blige's song, and now it's people like Adam Levine and Usher lending their voices to the new big genre. And really, things never went back. Even when looking at some of the biggest artists from the genre today, how often do you hear a lot of people talking about their solo work? How many people come up from the genre only to, you know, when they get to bigger heights, they don't really stick with the genre? You know, there's many different cases about it, you know. And you know, sometimes it's like you hear about an artist, but it's only because of them being featured on a rap artist song. You see kind of a lot of memes about different artists more than you see people talking about their music themselves, you know. And I know the first thing someone is going to say is that you're just not in the right spaces, but that's kind of my point exactly. It's become niche now, you know, like you have to seek out spaces to discuss, whereas rap is pretty much ubiquitous in the mainstream right now. It's so mainstream. You got all different, you know, places around the world diving into the genre. It's gotten to the point where you got the UK and Korea utilizing the genre, you know, and you got all different people across the world, you know, getting into the rap genre. And then, you know, it just, again, it's snowballed. It's a juggernaut that couldn't be stopped. It's on the very top right now. And I don't know, that's one of the main reasons I've seen as to why R&B lost its popularity, is that it's just simply another genre came in. You know, rap just got so big. And I mean, it's common to see that one genre is on top and then another one comes in. You know, we've seen it happen so often. But it's the main credited reason that I've seen is that rap came in and swept up a majority of audiences from various genres. So here's an interesting one. Why was a genre like rap able to easily sweep those people away? And the big reason I've seen some people say is that the genre of R&B simply didn't progress enough, and they chalked that up to the lack of performance. R&B was a genre all about drama. Paired with soul and jazz, R&B was over the top in its emotion and performance. And one of the most interesting points I saw brought up when it came to this argument was that part of it has to do with the lack of funding in schools. This person argued that as cuts happened in education, subjects such as music got cut and led to less musicians. And it kind of makes sense to me because, you know, how often do we hear real proper instrumentation these days? More often than not. And again, I don't mean this in any disrespect to producers, but more often than not, is it not pulled from other songs or some type of kit in, you know, beat making programs? It's something that was brought up and it interested me, you know, because like all areas of music, the label is going to look and they're going to say it's easier to pay one person than to pay multiple. Why pay for different people to be playing the trumpet, the piano, the horn? Why pay for an artist to take lessons to learn that stuff if you can just pay one singular person to come along, you know, and also potentially pay for sampling other work, you know? The person, you know, continued to expand by saying that this kind of applied to other areas, especially such as stage performance. All R&B isn't the same, but why is so much of modern R&B slow and more about its chill vibe? And, you know, because of that, it kind of leads to less elaborate music videos and performances, you know? And I've seen other people argue, you know, why K-pop pops off so much? It's because they go over the top with their performances. They have intricate dances, they have stylized performances. But with stuff like music, drama, and dance cut from the budget, you don't really see that over here a lot, you know? In fact, it's kind of viewed as different and doing too much if you're doing a lot of that stuff. And again, imagine trying to get any American label to really invest money into a lot of those areas. That's not to say that they don't, but especially with smaller artists, with more up and coming artists, they don't invest that much, you know? They want instant money from artists that aren't really doing anything to stand out. And that kind of leads back to the loss of progression argument. Our parents had the juggernauts, like I mentioned, Luther, Aretha, Michael, Prince. They led the charge in that genre, and I know they also, like, it was a mix of different genres, you know, but like they had these artists, and I get it, they're one in a million. You're not gonna get another artist like that, you know, but like the point is they got to that level by being different. You know, Michael, he put so much effort into things like visuals in his performances, elaborate outfits, high scale music videos. You know, Luther and Aretha made sure that you felt every single emotion in their voice when they went out and performed. Prince is literally someone who separated the terms musician and artist in a way, you know, and if that is what preceded, why is anybody going to be impressed by what follows if it's not to that standard in a sense, you know? Like if someone's showing up on stage and just performing in plain shirt and jeans, singing in place, when before you got such elaborate things, who's going to be impressed? Who's going to be interested, you know? And to be fair, as we mentioned before, sometimes it isn't the artist's fault, because it sometimes comes down to the labels not investing in those areas. Many artists especially have to do things completely on their own, you know, but the main argument with this reason is that people aren't really investing in those areas that made the genre stand out, you know, from its beautiful, soulful instruments and voices to the sheer effort and emotion put into the music. It was built on such factors and abilities, and there's many great artists out there that have them, but there are also some in the genre that don't and are kind of coasting off of things such as vocals, you know. I'll never forget the time I saw a poster article about the fact that songwriters are no longer a thing, and this person's argument was that before there were singers and songwriters, but at some point, rather than continuing to write for the big stars, the songwriters could just make the music themselves. And basically what they were arguing was that this led to a lot of artists with great voices, but failed to realize it kind of takes more than a great voice to make it in the music world. Charisma, charm, stage presence, composition, and kind of in turn, artists with such characteristics lost out on the important part of music and writing, you know. Artists with those characteristics but lacked in the writing department were now kind of left without a source of aid since they were choosing to start their own career, thus causing this limbo-esque state. Like I said, very interesting argument to be made, and especially because you look at it and you're like, man, there are some people that are lacking some of these things. And this is kind of one of my favorite arguments from this study, was just looking and realizing that, yeah, maybe something plateaus. I mean, obviously something's going to plateau if there isn't more progression to it, if there isn't more development to it, you know. And it kind of just sparks the question, where do you go from the peak? While searching for answers, I've seen a couple other reasons proposed. I've seen people say the music industry is not investing enough in the genre. Nostalgia is what's holding it back. Going back to, you know, the whole progression thing. It's like, hey, well, you know, people aren't willing to accept the new sort of R&B because it's not exactly one-to-one like the old R&B. I've seen people say that the target audience has shifted. And I've even seen some people blame the attention span of current society. And while a lot of those reasons that we've looked at, you know, contributed, I think there's one reason, but it's funny because that one reason is kind of a amalgamation of everything, you know. And the simple answer is things are different now. With the rise of pop and rap, other genres kind of had two choices. Stick it out, knowing you'll always have a core audience to support you, or adapt. And for R&B, it chose to adapt. And I know earlier we literally talked about the arguments that R&B wasn't progressing and didn't progress. But I think it's just more appropriate to say that it progressed in a way that many didn't like, and that kind of ties into the whole nostalgia thing. Rather than sticking to its roots, R&B looked at the rise of the two genres and decided to adapt. R&B adapted various elements from rap, and thus the current state of R&B almost looks more like a subgenre of rap at times, or subgenre of other genres. From song structure to subject matter, a lot of R&B changed to fit in with what is considered popular. But if it's doing what is considered popular, why is the genre itself not popular? Well, because it has adopted so much. Again, it just kind of looks like an extension rather than its own thing. You see many artists, they're labeled as pop with an R&B influence. Others are labeled as melodic rap, you know. One could say that R&B stepped away from its roots and in turn lost its identity. Even some of the genre's biggest stars have lost that label. I was talking about it at the start, let's look at an example like The Weeknd. He started off in that R&B genre, but got so big that, look at it, no one considers him an R&B star anymore. They look at him as a pop star. You could kind of almost say the same thing for someone like Michael, you know? So it's like, it's something where you're just looking at it and it's like, that identity has been lost. And another argument that I've seen is also when it comes to the artists themselves. I've brought it up before and I'm always going to bring it up in hopes that I can maybe one day find a video again. But there was a video that I remember watching where it talked about, like, in the rock genre, why is it that some bands succeeded, or not necessarily succeeded, but got to a much higher level of success than others. And the argument of that video was that simply groups with more charismatic leads went on to find mainstream success. And well, in the rap world right now, being mysterious and closed off and nonchalant, that became the big thing for the past couple of years. And once again, R&B kind of followed in those footsteps, despite it being that those footsteps were stepping away from their roots. Even if you were a private person in real life, R&B was always the genre for extravagance and flashiness, stylish, you know. You would see outlandish, yet again stylish outfits, intricate dances and choreography, intense emotion, passionate and personal lyrics. And it's not to say that there isn't any of that now. I mean, I talked about a lot of great artists in the R&B section this past year, but it just feels like a lot of that is lost. Not everything entirely, but, you know, a good portion. And as a whole, the identity of R&B is lost right now, because you ask yourself, what defining factor is separating R&B from the other genres right now? Life is a cycle. R&B used to be on top, then it was rock, then it was rap. Genres fall only to later emerge based on society's current landscape or when people grow tired and seek something new. So again, there is a chance for R&B to emerge once again, but I think the biggest thing it has to answer is, what is R&B? It needs to look at its roots. It needs to look at the fact that it wants to progress and grow, and ask itself, where does it want to go? What does it want to do? Things are different now. Things will continue to be different. But what will be the difference that returns R&B to the top? Alright, I know this video was short and maybe not like the most informative, you know, but I gotta remind people from time to time, and remind myself, that that's the reason why I chose to have podcasts in the name of this channel. Even though I knew I was going to be doing a lot of video essays, I still wanted to leave it open to the premise of a podcast. Basically, you know, I've been doing this for a while. I started off doing it in high school as a part of a club. I've done it in the past with friends, and I've always just liked the idea of, you know, sometimes just rambling on about a topic that interests you, you know. And again, this was just an idea that randomly came to me during brainstorming, and secretly between me and you, I just wanted an excuse to shout out some of my favorite artists right now in an underrated genre, because at the end of the day, I always like to put a positive spin on things. We're all about positivity on this channel, except when it comes to the Sixers. But again, my biggest thing in life is always that there's no point in criticizing and tearing something down if you aren't going to provide solutions for change, you know. And again, going back to our previous arguments, R&B is kind of at a disadvantage because it comes down to the labels. You know, the labels need to look at it. They need to invest more is basically what I think, you know. Like, I think you need to bring back a lot more of that soul and jazz influence, especially with the live instrumentation. I think they need to invest more in the genre's presentation to change its perception, you know. And I don't know, I think they need to get back to their roots, but still in a way that allows them to progress rather than just, you know, biting off of nostalgia, you know. Like, I think there's a lot of unique ways they can go about it, you know. And again, it's just an underrated genre to me that, you know, has a lot of great work out of it. And even though it may not be as popular, I just really enjoy the genre to this day, and I still think there's a lot of good names who are doing their best to try and, you know, bring the genre back up. There's even so many people in the media space that are trying their best. Like, I will never forget back when I used to be on Twitter in like 2021 for like a podcast account that I had for my friends and I's podcast. There was this one guy, I believe the page was called R&B Radar, who he was like all about, you know, just trying to get people into more R&B, to really start promoting more of these smaller artists whose labels weren't doing a lot for them, you know. And that's how I ended up finding a lot of great artists. And then, you know, after no longer being on Twitter, I started just branching out myself. I always love exploring different genres. And again, to put a positive spin, let me just close this out by giving you some of my favorite artists in the R&B space right now to check out. And I know a lot of people are going to hear certain artists and be like, well, they're not R&B, this and that, and that's not R&B, that's a this and that. But again, the genre has kind of changed. It's, I don't know, my biggest thing is that, like, man, you have so many different artists who it's like they're genre bending in a way, so it's like it's kind of difficult to really, like, you guys see in the year-end videos, I always have difficulty categorizing music, you know. But like, I think that's one of the big arguments that I like, is that, like, it's kind of lent itself to so many other genres that, like, it's become an extension of so many other genres, you know. Like, I look at an artist like Blast, who I'm going to shout out in this list, you know. He is known for kind of combining rap and R&B into one, you know. So it's like, that's kind of what I was talking about when I was saying that, like, there's just a lot of different artists in the space that are combining different genres with R&B. And because of it, when people listen to it, they don't necessarily associate it with R&B, and instead look at it as an extension of another genre, such as, you know, again, melodic rap, or labeling it as pop with R&B influence, you know. So, but again, positive spin. Let's close this out. Some of my favorites, we got Baby Rose, Blast, Chase Shakur, Christian Courier, Coco Jones, Denise Julia, Destin Conrad, Devon Gilfillian, DPR Ian, Dylan Sinclair, Ethan Lowe, Gemini, Georgia Smith, Jack James, Kabwasa, Kalani's been killing it for the longest time, Keshi, Lucky Day, Raven Lene, Ruben James, Twee, and that's not even getting into some of the singular songs from artists that I've yet to check out in full, you know. For me, just like with every genre, there is something out there for everybody. Well, except country.